If you've been thinking about buying a gaming keyboard, you might have heard terms like adjustable actuation points, rapid trigger, dual bindings, and snap tap, and more besides, and wondered what all that means. If you've been talking to friends or looking online, then you might have heard that you must get rapid trigger for your gaming keyboard because it's really important to make sure you get the edge when playing FPS games. And I'm here to talk to you about the various different features and hardware parts of the Huntsman V3 Pro TKL and the other Huntsman keyboards in the lineup to talk to you about why rapid trigger is interesting, how it can be very useful, and the other features and specifications of this keyboard that can give you the edge in FPS games and make it worth considering. So stick with me as I go into all the different things that you might find interesting and what the different specs and features can mean for you. Before that, though, you don't have to take my word for it. Head over to prosettings.net and you can see a list of the hardware that the pro players use. So esports players and the list of gaming keyboards that they use. You can see the Huntsman V3 Pro TKL takes up 13% of the usage in that list from the various different pro players. And that's thanks in part to Razer's Analog Optical Switches and the rapid trigger functionality and more in the keyboard, making it the current top choice for some of the best players in the world. The Huntsman V3 Pro lineup uses Razer's Analog Optical Switches Gen 2. These are highly customizable switches which support an actuation range of between 0.1mm and 4mm, adjustable in Synapse. Now this leads to a really fast actuation and rapid response from the keyboard, which goes along with a 1.7 millisecond latency, making it ultra responsive for gaming. As you can see, the keys are also individually stabilized across the board. But what's interesting is the way these switches work, a hint of which you can see from the way WASD is lighting up green and red here, which is basically showing when the switch is turning on and off, and this is a clue towards rapid trigger and the logic of that. But quickly I want to show you a breakdown of standard switches versus the optical switches to give you an idea of what it means. So these mechanical switches from Razer, the clicky Gen 2 switches for example, use a traditional setup with a leaf spring which is designed to basically register your click at a certain point. Now this is one example of many different switches available out there, and you will have found it on traditional gaming keyboards. You take the switch apart and you'll find multiple bits inside, including a spring and then the little setup in there which registers the click when you push it down, so you can see this click in action. It's fairly straightforward, but what it means is the switch will actuate at a certain point, and that is when the key press is registered and sent to your PC for your game to pick up. Razer's Analog Optical Switches, by comparison, use a light beam in order to register the press, so the beam of light is broken as you press the key down. This means it can accurately track how far you've pressed the switch, which means that you can adjust the actuation point of where the press is registered, but also it will be accurate over time too, and it isn't affected by things like the wear and tear on the switch on that bit of metal that I showed you in the traditional mechanical switches, for example, which is pretty neat. Of course, some gamers will argue that Hall effect is superior and optical switches are outdated, but Razer has done some testing to show that its optical analog switches are more accurate than Hall effect switches in a variety of ways. For example, they're calibrated at the factory, they're immune to the effects of temperature, external magnetic forces, and more, and are precise and highly accurate with a 1.7 millisecond latency registered from the switch under very strict testing conditions, which they've detailed on their website. I'll link to that article down below. What does all this mean for the Huntsman V3 Pro lineup of keyboards? Well, this means that you can manually adjust the actuation point and the rapid trigger on the keyboard by pressing the function key and caps lock for rapid trigger, or function key and tab for the actuation levels. Now you can do this within Synapse, but if you want to do it on the fly, you can nice and easily. I'll get to rapid trigger in a second, but what you can see is that you can gauge how far the actuation level is using this dial on the right hand side. You can either adjust it with the volume wheel or with the directional arrows, and then you're setting essentially when the key activates based on how far you've pressed it in. You can put it one way to be a really light touch, or you can put it the other way to be a full press. Now you'd want a nice deep press for something like your everyday typing, but for gaming you want a really responsive actuation, so a very low 0.1 millimeter, for example, key press would be enough to activate really quickly in the middle of a game and get the best action out of your keyboard. However, what you will find is that the keys will accidentally activate when you're resting your hand on the keyboard, which isn't ideal for typing, so it's nice to be able to switch between these things. You'll also see that page up, delete, end, and page down have different profiles built into them, so you can switch between those on the fly, moving between things like racing mode, FPS mode, and a standard mode, so that you can use it either for typing or for gaming, making your life a lot easier, both for gaming and for your overall use. As well as tweaking these things via the keyboard, you can also do it with Synapse. So you can use Razer's Synapse software to switch between these and adjust the actuation level of the various different keys and tweak the modes. But you can also do it to access Rapid Trigger and see what that means for your gaming experience. So Rapid Trigger is a technology that you can turn on that makes the most of the adjustable actuation points and of these optical switches. With your traditional mechanical switch, as I showed earlier on, in order to activate it, you first have to push it past a certain point so it clicks the little switch. And then in order to activate another pressure, you have to lift up the switch so it goes back up past that point, and then you can put it back down again. With a rapid trigger switch, because it's doing an optical register of the click, what happens instead is you push it down a certain distance, and as soon as you start to lift your finger up, you can push it down immediately again, giving you an instant actuation and a much faster response. You can see that from this graphic on the right-hand side, where essentially you're lifting your finger up and then putting it back down again. You can also see this in action on the keyboard itself, because you'll see with the WASD keys, for example, when they're reacting to the rapid trigger actuation, you can see them change between green and red to let you know when it's activated and when it isn't. This obviously cuts down on milliseconds when pressing the buttons, because you have to lift them less in order to then push it back down and activate it again. So things like moving and strafing in a game where it requires fast-paced movement and action in a game can really make a big difference, can cut down on the time there, and can theoretically give you the edge. You can also adjust rapid trigger even further, so you can adjust the sensitivity of it and set that really high level at 0.1 millimeters, for example, and make it even more responsive. So you're basically just the lightest feather touch and it activates, lift it up again, put it back down again. You basically just keep on gaming really quickly and sending the signals much faster to the game than you would with a traditional gaming keyboard. As if that wasn't enough, the Huntsman V3 Pro also includes another update which has dropped via firmware, and you can customize that by simply downloading the update via Synapse or directly from the website and upgrade it even further with SnapTap. SnapTap can be turned on with function and shift, and you'll see the A and D keys either light up white or red to let you know whether it's on or off. What this does is it allows you to easily strafe around in your games and basically counters the way a keyboard would normally work. So with it off, you'll see if you press and hold A and then tap D, that interferes with the A command. So the A is no longer being sent through. However, with SnapTap turned on, if you hold A down and tap D and then let go of D, it basically puts A back on. So imagine in a game you're strafing left and then you want to strafe right a little bit, but you don't want to interfere with your left movement. You can just tap D and then release it again and you'll be off. So function and shift to turn it on, make sure it's lit up white, and then when you're in the game you can basically get this smoother, faster, more responsive strafing action left and right. This currently only applies to the A and D keys, so it only applies for strafing like this, but it'd be pretty useful if you're playing competitive shooters like PUBG or CSGO or Valorant or something like that, where you need to be able to move really quickly. You can use it for corner peeking and just erratic movement that will make you more difficult to hit. Now, I found it quite difficult to get used to because I'm very used to just lifting my fingers off of those specific keys to do the other movements. So if you want to go left, obviously, you're lifting your fingers off the movement keys that would push you to the right. But once you get sort of into the right frame of mind for it, it could be really beneficial. And you might find that if you're able to adjust to this, you should be able to get kills more easily and maybe help you to get the upper hand. It could have some interesting implications if they throw it in an update in future for racing games as well. If you can imagine if you're pushing W, but you also want to tap the brake without having to lift your finger off the accelerator, then that could be another option. So you can practice with it in aim labs to get better at it and get into the right mindset of it, and then take it into the various games that you want to play and hopefully do better than me with it. However, it is worth noting that not all games are going to support SnapTap in a nice way. Valve has made a ban, for example, with Counter-Strike 2, where you will get kicked for using it, and it applies to both Razer's SnapTap and Wooting's alternative as well, so that's worth noting. They made an official statement on it. You're not going to get banned for using it, but you might get kicked. And this might well be the case for other highly competitive games. You can, of course, turn this hardware feature off if you're concerned about it and stick to using it in single-player games instead, but it is worth noting before you jump into using SnapTap. As you can see, Razer's done a great job with the Huntsman V3 Pro lineup of keyboards. There's a lot of thought that's gone into this, with a lot of testing and a lot of hardware delivering a fantastic keyboard. The Gen 2 optical analog switches are highly accurate and really responsive for gaming sessions, but also comfortable to type on thanks to that stabilization. There are a number of things that I really liked about this keyboard when I reviewed it, so I'll link to that video in the description, and it has delivered and continues to do so. It's had a nice update with obviously the SnapTap edition, but the adjustable actuation and the rapid trigger response are going to be appealing for a lot of people. If you want to get the competitive edge and feel like you're doing really well, and obviously it makes sense to snap up a keyboard that esports players and the pros are using on a daily basis. Hope you found this video useful. Don't forget to check out the links in the description to related articles and things of interest. This has been The Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching.